Okay, we're recording. Welcome everybody. Nice to see you. Those of you I see. Here's some noise there. I'm just going to mute everybody. So let's start by taking a moment. I wonder if my camera is crooked. Let's notice if my camera is crooked. let's take a moment to notice, just to observe our experience. So there's many layers or levels of subtlety at which we can observe our experience. So I want to give a little bit of instruction here. So when I say observe your experience, I have no idea what your experience is. So there might be some, you might, like some people, find that your mind then says, well, okay, let me think about this. So that's a somewhat superficial level of observation, is to observe your thinking, but not even in a very deep way, just sort of observing the thought stream and kind of taking it seriously. Like what is this? What is this? Is this good? Is this bad? Do I like it? Do I not like it? Am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? What does he mean? Am I going to die? Will it be painful? Am I hungry? What is that sensation? You know, I mean, there's all these kinds of thoughts. Oh, I can't believe that he said that. I can't believe that those people did that thing. I can't believe that whatever. I mean, so those are the superficial level. So what most people give their attention to most of the time. So here's a clue. Okay, if you look out around yourself, I mean, you can do it now, but I mean, in general, in life, notice what's going on, what seems to be happening for other people, and ask yourself, is that what you want your fate to be? Right? If you want the same fate as the majority, then do what the majority is doing. So if that looks good to you, then just keep giving attention to your thoughts like that, because that's what most people are doing. Then you can try to solve all your problems at that level. So you do a lot of thinking at that level. But let's at least, whether you think you're content with that or not, maybe you think, yeah, that sounds great. I want that. I want that for myself. That sounds wonderful. Okay, but let's just at least familiarize ourselves with what else is possible. Okay, so just humor me in this. Let's explore slightly a slightly subtler realm of our experience. There are many ways to do this, so we'll explore it a couple of different ways. Okay, so one of my favorite, which I've said at times, is a somatic exploration, because somatics I find are just a very effective, thought-free language, we could say, for exploring subtler levels of experience. So you can right now just notice that you are feeling sensations. So the old habit is to try to label the sensations, right? You want to say, okay, that's good sensation, bad sensation. That's pain, that's pleasure, that's hunger, that's lust, that's tiredness, that's whatever, on and on, right? It's endless and rather dull, let's admit it, okay? So what I'm proposing is, instead of concerning ourselves with the labels, let's just observe directly, just direct perception, unmediated by the thoughts. So we don't have to get rid of the thoughts. The thoughts are welcome to be there. But it's like, and I'll lose everybody if I use a baseball metaphor. I was about to use a baseball. I was about to talk about baseball. Of all things, I was going to mention baseball, which is, half of the people here are not even American. So I'd have lost you. But let's say if you're okay, at a sporting event, so soccer, okay, or football, as some of you like to call it, okay. And I presume that when you're there, you could have a radio, and you could tune into the sports commentators talking about the game, right? You could do that. And alternatively, you could not tune into that, and instead you could just observe the game. So then you might find that tuning into the sports commentator is somewhat distracting from the immediacy of the game that's in front of you. And then you might say, oh, I don't like this, I'm going to turn off the radio. You turn it off. But then somebody sitting next to you has a radio that's playing the sports commentator, and they've got it turned up loud. So now you can't turn that one off unless you want to get into a fight. And I don't think you want to get into a fight at a sporting event. It's not a good idea. Okay. So now the question is, does that sports commentator on the radio have to? Does it command your attention? Just because it's there, do you have to give your attention to it? Most people would say yes. But I would say no. I would say no. So we don't need to shut it off. And we don't need to stick our fingers in our ears and say, la, 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 I can't hear you. We can notice how it is that we make the unnecessary effort to tune into something. We don't have to add more effort to tune out. We just have to become aware of how we make the effort to tune in. And then we can soften that. And that takes us to the next subtler layer, the next subtler level, the more immediate, closer, intimate experience. So even if the mind is giving its commentary, that's fine. You don't need to try to you don't need to work harder to tune it out. If the mind has its labels, that's fine, right? It does. It's just what it does. Can't help itself. It's trained to do that. And the poor thing, it's very confusing when we train it very clearly to do one thing, and then we turn around and we try to shut it down. Oh, bad mind doing that again. It's like, imagine this poor dog. Okay, you train the dog to do some trick, and then every time the dog does the trick, it's like you reward the dog, and then you slap it. This poor dog. Like, this poor dog is going to be very confused. It's not the dog's fault. You trained it. You're the one that keeps rewarding it for doing this thing. So with the mind, same thing. Why get into a fight with it? Why slap it? Let's not bother. Let's be gentle. Let's be kind. Let's just see what's actually happening. We see, okay, look, can we at least admit, can we just start with the admission that there was a time when we did not think? There's a time when you didn't think, right? I mean, it must have been. You didn't have any language, so you certainly weren't forming sentences in your mind. You didn't have these inner commentators saying, good job, bad job, shame on you, go for it, we're winning, we're losing, yes, no. You didn't have that because you hadn't learned language yet. You hadn't learned those ideas yet. The idea of you didn't. There was a time when the idea of you hadn't yet formed. There was literally no you, right? I mean, like so many people. I mean, small, relatively small, but it's a lot of people. A lot of people have this idea that they're going to solve all their problems if they can get rid of themselves, right? So there's this sort of niche subculture in spirituality that seeks to get rid of the self. Not even all that niche. It's fairly mainstream now, right? I mean, you know, the ego is bad. So you see the strategies that people use in that, right? It's a lot of loudness, violence, denial, a lot of negativity used, trying to shut it down, shut it out, get rid of it, kill it. And it doesn't work very well. I mean, if it worked very well, we'd have a lot of happier people, but people aren't that happy. So what I'm proposing is let's not do that. There was a time when there was no you, a time in this lifetime. Isn't that an interesting thing to consider? I mean, really let that in. Can you see that? Can you see that there was a time when there was no you? I mean, you might not, you wouldn't remember it. Of course, you wouldn't, you couldn't remember it because you didn't exist. The you who's hearing, the you who's interpreting this and making sense of all of this and fitting it into these ideas, that you didn't exist. That you is entirely conditioning. It is only an assemblage of conditioning. That's all that it is. And that did not exist at a certain point. You were born, you came into this world, and that didn't exist. That, I think that should blow your mind. Because for the last however many years, for decades now, you and me, we've all been living as if I am this thing that came to be sometime after I was born, that was a program that installed itself into this body of conditioning. So we don't need to fight with that. What good is that going to do? It's just it's like a trained dog. Just stop doing what you're doing, and then you can start seeing more clearly. So that's what I'm proposing. So the commentator may be going, and just don't, I mean, the comment was spot on. You just don't need to pay it any attention. You don't need to see, but that doesn't mean you have to be mean to it, right? It's just don't reward it for doing the thing that you don't want it to do. So there's a subtle point here, right? Because we can subtly still be trying to get rid of, we're still at war with the ego, still trying to get rid of this self by ignoring it, right? That's still the same game. So we have to be subtler than that, and we have to recognize that, and we have to be gentler. Very, very, very gentle. Because who's the enemy here? Why do we need to go to war? Let's not do that. When we do that, we create the enemy. The enemy is an illusion that we are creating. We are creating it through our use of hatred and violence. So we can just observe the direct experience, even while the commentator is doing its thing. That's just what it's programmed to do. So let's not get involved in trying to shut it down or going to war with it. It's just doing that. Okay. But we can observe to notice that we are experiencing these sensations. So just notice right now that you're experiencing sensations. Can you notice that? I hope so. If not, I don't know. We're in trouble. So you're noticing these sensations. And isn't it fascinating that your whole life, practically, with few exceptions, I mean, there may be, for those of us who are lucky, there have been punctuations in our lives where we say, wow, it's amazing. I have no idea what this is. This is fresh. It's new. This moment right now is completely new. But most of the time, we don't have that sense, do we? Most of the time, we're just like, I've done this, been here, boring, on to the next. Now, that's a lie. You've never had this experience. You've never experienced this sensation. So we're having to get subtler in our perception to really recognize this. So still there's some level of the commentator going on that's saying, don't pay any attention to that. You've done that before. You already know this. You already know this, it says, right? It's like, you already know this. This is boring. This doesn't go anywhere. This is not going to be useful. This isn't exciting. This isn't juicy. This isn't going to give us the thing that we need. You've got to work harder. You got to go do something and get it. But that hasn't worked out very well, right? I mean, after a certain amount of time, you have to admit, okay, wait a second. How long does it take to get a PhD? I'm not saying that people who have PhDs are necessarily masters in their field, but they certainly have a level of expertise in something that the average person does not have, right? We recognize if somebody has a PhD, they're fairly knowledgeable about the subject. How long does it take to get a PhD? I don't know, 4 years, 3 years? A while, takes a while, okay, but not as long as your lifetime. Okay, so in your lifetime, you've been doing the same thing. So I would say that by now, you have achieved you've achieved a level of expertise and mastery at what you do in your life that surpasses that of a PhD, right? Because you've been practicing it and studying it over and over and over for a long time, decades, the same habits. So by now, I think you are in a position to really assess, is this working out well or not? Maybe you could just take a look at it and see, actually, it's time for a career change, is what I'm getting at, right? You know, like, you've invested in this career. Early on, you said, I'm going to study nuclear physics. That sounds like a whiz bang, amazing thing to study. I could work I could work on nuclear reactors, and it would be wonderful. And then 25, 30, 40 years down the line, you realize, I hate working on nuclear reactors. I hate nuclear physics. This is disgusting. I want nothing to do with this. If I have to get up another day and if I have to hear the word fusion or fission again, I don't know which one is which. I'm not a nuclear physicist. But if I have to hear these things again, I will off myself. I can't stand it. It's time for a career change. And so I'm saying you have a level of expertise that surpasses that of a PhD. You've invested a lot into this path of your life. And you can just take a look honestly and just say, look, it's not working out. It's time for a career change. Like, I'm tired of this career of unhappiness. What do I think I'm going to get out of this? You know, it's like, how much unhappiness are you trying to accumulate? I'm very, very wealthy in unhappiness. It's not a currency that will get you much. Try going to the store and purchasing things with your unhappiness. So it is time for a career change. Now let's take a look. Okay, if you want a career change, okay, so say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Maybe for those of you who don't know, you're not native English speakers, you're like, what are you talking about? You can't teach a dog, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. It's an English idiom. Okay, it's an American idiom. Maybe it's not even one that other English speakers know. So let me translate it for everybody. Okay, what it means is, and then after this, I'll talk about baseball a little bit. No, what it means is that when that age, as someone ages, they become set in their ways. So if you try to get that person to do something differently, they won't. And people accept that this is just true. But this is not true. What is actually true is just, it was an incoming call that muted the meeting for a second. But you're so invested in the path, in your habits, in your conditioning, in what is familiar, in what you think you know. You're so invested in your reality, your idea of reality, the parameters within which you operate, which you consider to be safe enough. You're so invested in that you're practically, not literally, but practically, as in practical terms, you are blind to anything else. But does that mean that this greater reality does not exist just because you're blind to it? So just because just because you're 75 years old and you have studied nuclear physics your whole life, and you've never learned how to throw a baseball, Does that mean that there is no baseball? Does that mean that there is no throwing? Does that mean there is no arm? Does that mean there's no outside? Does that mean that there's no, that these experiences are not available? Obviously not. It just means that you are invested in a particular limitation. Somebody uh, who was once a mentor of mine would say, he would say something like, argue for your limitations and they're yours. But you see, like we argue for our limitations. We really do. Our whole life is organized around arguing for our limitations. And when we come back, this whole investigation that we're doing is taking much longer than I anticipated. But when we come back from this investigation, then we can again take a look at our thoughts, but we'll see the thoughts with a fresh perspective, and you'll see that that's all that's happening. The thoughts, all of that commentary, it's just arguing for the limitations. Oh, I can't because, oh no, don't do that. Oh, that would be unsafe. No, that's impossible. I really want to, but. So how do we teach an old dog new tricks? How do we teach an old dog new tricks? We have to rejuvenate the dog. How do we rejuvenate a dog? Well, we need a time machine. Fortunately, we have a time machine. This life is a time machine. Isn't it? Isn't that what's happening? Isn't this a time machine? I mean, what else is it if it's not a time machine? Where does time come from if not from this? It's made up by this. Time is a product of this machine. Getting some dubious looks, that's okay. So we're going to rejuvenate the dog by, oh God, I'm going to say it. We're going to rejuvenate the dog by hacking the machine. we're gonna do a little hacking. Okay. So the dog grows old, and in fact, we grow old. Hey, I'm going off on so many seeming tangents, but isn't this an interesting question? Why do we grow older? And how do you know that you are older? This is a very, very, very interesting question to me. To me, it's a very interesting question and a very relevant one. So it's really worth considering. How do you know? I mean, you know that you are older now than you were, right? I mean, say you look like your grandfather. Yeah. Yeah. How do you know that you're older? What is the way that we measure? I mean, you could say, well, it's appearance, but you don't see yourself that much unless you're looking in the mirror all day. So let me put this another way. Are you actually older? I mean, the body seems to age, right? I'm not denying that. The body seems to age. The body changes, right? The body changes. But and your thoughts change, not so much. They repeat mostly. But you I mean, the one who's hearing this, not the one who's interpreting it, not the one who's understanding it, but the one who's actually hearing it, the one who is aware of the thoughts. Does this one change? Does this one grow older? Are you actually older now than you were? The one who's hearing this, is it actually older? Does it have an age? If it has an age, let me know, because I would really like to hear about how you would know that. So either it's a very shy group, or you don't actually find that it has an age. So what is it that we use to determine that we are older? You say, okay, I look in the mirror, but you don't have to look in the mirror, right? You can do something else. You refer to some things in order. I mean, so that's one thing that you could do, right? I mean, that's, you could look in the mirror, so you could look to an image. So you could refer to an image. You could refer to memory, right? So you could say, well, I know I'm older because I can remember when I was younger. And then there's at least one other way, uh, which probably, there are probably many variants on this, but the one that I'll mention is that there's a somatic experience that we refer to, and we just unquestioningly say, well, that's me getting older. So you experience certain aches, pains, limitations, and you say, well, that's just proof I'm getting older. So you refer to these things. You have to refer to these other things, these things that appear in your experience, and then you say, oh, well, that's proof that I'm older. Meanwhile, you're actually willfully overlooking the fact that you, who is aware, is ageless. So what is happening? I'm going to try to tie all this together. It's a lot of pieces that I've left dangling out there, and I'll see if I can tie them together. All with an amazing baseball metaphor. No, I won't use a baseball metaphor. Um, I can see nobody finds that humorous other than me. I find it endlessly humorous, but that's fine that none of you have good senses of humor. So we have to refer to these things. We have to refer to some kind of thought, memory, idea, or image. And then we say, well, there, it's proof that I'm older. And then we accept that that's true. And we say, well, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I've been a nuclear physicist my whole life. I guess that's just what I'll be, even though I hate it. Too old for a career change. And I'm saying, no, we can rejuvenate the dog. And the way we rejuvenate the dog is we have to reveal that that it was all a lie. There's absolutely nothing that prevents an old dog from learning new tricks, other than the unwillingness to fully accept that it's possible. So I think what happens is that we become afraid. And we organize our lives around that. So that our core identity actually becomes fear. Now, you cannot learn anything new when you're identified with fear. And this is what happens because you say, I'm 75 years old. I'm a world famous nuclear physicist. And what I really want to do is play baseball. But I've never thrown a ball in my life. People are going to laugh at me. I'm not any good at this. I'll never be a professional baseball player. I'll never be that good. I don't really think that it's worth it. I don't think it's worth it. I don't want to risk it. It's too scary. So when we organize our lives around this identification with fear, then what's the MO? The MO is, well, argue for your limitations. No, can't because fill in the blank. So the remedy the remedy is what's the remedy for fear? Well, the remedy for fear, we could say it a lot of different ways, but it comes back to this observation, direct observation. So just notice the sensations as they are. And be particularly interested in the uncomfortable sensations. And I'll tell you why, is because the uncomfortable sensations, there's no such thing, just so you know. There's no such thing as an uncomfortable sensation, but what you interpret is uncomfortable, okay? That interpretation exists because this is something that you have literally stored somewhere in your body mind, and you organize your life to avoid it. And when you have the experience of seeing this and experiencing this, you will experience an ecstatic release. And you will know exactly what I'm talking about. You won't be, it's not you don't have to think about it. You will just know it exactly because it will be crystal clear to you. So it really is as simple as you just have to continue to observe in this way. So you observe and notice that the sensations that are uncomfortable for you, you can notice how you organize your entire life trying to avoid them. So be very still. And when I say still, and I've said this before, but it's always worth repeating. So when I say still, I don't mean use restraint. I don't mean hold yourself rigid. That would not be what I am intending. That would not work. What I am meaning is inhibit the habitual reactivity, trying to adjust and find comfort by avoiding the discomfort. So you'll notice that there are these perhaps not so subtle or perhaps very subtle sensations that your nervous system interprets as uncomfortable. And if you are very still in a gentle, open, curious way, not in a rigid way. Again, I want to make sure that's really clear. If you're holding yourself rigid, like can't move, that won't work. You have to be very still in a soft, quiet way. Observe the sensations. And then notice the compulsions to do something, to adjust in some way so that you can avoid the discomfort. Now your mind might not put it in those terms. Your mind might just say, well, I'm just trying to get comfortable. It's not a big deal. What are you talking about? Why are you making a big deal out of this? It's not a big deal at all. That's what the mind will say. Leave me alone. Get off my case. But you just gently, quietly observe, and I promise you, you will see that this is true. It's really quite clear when you see it. You organize your entire life. You start to become aware of all of these little tics and habits and behaviors that you have, ways of thinking, ways of perceiving, that are entirely organized around avoiding this discomfort. And what has that done for you? It has helped you to specialize in arguing for your limitations. You have constructed, albeit largely unconsciously, through the assimilation of what others have told you, through the process of enculturation, but you have, nonetheless, you have learned and trained yourself to form this identity that is defined fundamentally out of fear, and which is organized around avoiding discomfort. The discomfort is all of the habits of self-protection, armoring. It's from all of the countless ways, the experiences in which we learned, and that doesn't mean that it was the correct thing to learn, it's just what we learned. We learned not safe, armor, protect, hide, avoid. And again, mine might say, oh yeah, get off my case, big deal. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? Everybody does that. Who cares? What does that have to do with anything? What does that have to do with my problems? I've got problems. I've got relationship problems, financial problems, health problems, anxiety problems, mental health problems. I've got all these problems. I've got serious problems. Why are you wasting my time with this talk about this nonsense that doesn't have anything to do with anything? And again, I would say you just look around and take a look. Are you wanting for yourself the same thing, this just status quo? Are you wanting what most people's lives, are you wanting that for yourself? Because if so, listen to those thoughts and act from those thoughts, because that will give you exactly that. I mean, it's just sort of math. You do the same thing as everybody else. 4 + 4, it's 8. You say, well, yeah, but I think it's going to be different this time. Okay? You get to do that. I mean, you get to do that if you wish, but you're gambling your life. And instead, all that we have to do is, all this time that we have, it's a giant time machine, constantly producing time. We have endless time at our disposal, constantly being produced. And we have all of this time, and what do we do with it? repeat the same thing. And what could we do with it? We could observe our experience. So let me, I don't know that any of this has been particularly clear. I'll make a couple more comments on this, though, to help hopefully try to clarify it. So why is it that observing our experience directly, just observing the sensations and noticing the habits of avoidance and unnecessary effort, why is that useful? How does that rejuvenate an old dog? Because age, and by age I mean what we normally associate with age. So I don't mean necessarily just the number of years that have gone by, but I mean what we associate with age, being set in your ways, becoming more rigid, more fixed, right? I mean, that's what we associate with age, is that people become in all ways more rigid and more fixed. Sometimes, you know, as people grow older, they start repeating themselves. We say, well, that's just grandpa, he's just getting older. So a lot of repetition, a lot of rigidity. The body, we associate greater rigidity in the body with age. I know you're not supposed to go to the store these days, but if you were to go to the store and just observe some people in the store, and you were to watch the older people walking around in the store, you would notice in general, the older people tend to have more rigidity in the way that they hold themselves and walk. And what I'm saying is that that's not due to biology. There's no biology that obligates the body to become more rigid, or that obligates the mind to become more rigid. What I'm proposing is that it is the increasing habits of avoidance of discomfort and novelty that produces that rigidity that we associate with age. And so if we want to rejuvenate, it's not so much that we need to make the body look younger. See, that's like that's in this bigger culture, that's many people are obsessed with that, right? You see a lot of people, they really want to preserve the more youthful appearance of the body. But does it work? Does it give satisfying results? No. Because it's a superficial thing. What we're interested in here is not so much the superficial. We don't care so much about the appearance. Whatever. Who cares? Let the appearance be what the appearance is. That is superficial. That will reflect the deeper truth, the deeper realization, the deeper clarity, if we put things in the right order. So rather than focusing on the superficial and being concerned about a youthful appearance, we can be more interested in the youthful a youthful mode of perception. So a youthful mode of perception is, for example, in Buddhism, they talk about beginner's mind. So a youthful mode of perception is beginner's mind. It is when we really innocently recognize, I don't know. It's not a false humility of, yeah, I don't know, but I am a world famous PhD. It's not that. It's, wow, I really don't know. And because we are more mature, then this maturity cuts both ways. So the tendency, because of the lack of support and general awareness around these issues in the broader culture, the tendency is that with maturity comes the things that we associate with aging, uh, because of that tendency to become more conservative, more fearful, avoid more. But what also comes with maturity, which is a great blessing, is that there's a new quality to this youthful perception that's not available to youth. Okay, so when young children naturally, I mean, a baby naturally perceives with this innocence and this youthful perception because they don't know. I mean, you look at a newborn baby, and the newborn baby is just like, oh, wow, taking it all in. You know, I don't know what it is. I'm just taking it in. So um, we can have that, but we can also have that together with this thing that the ripeness that comes with maturity. There's a fruit that comes with maturity, which is uh, I'm not sure what to call it. I'll use some various terms for it, but it's there. You could say patience. I think patience is the best word I can come up with actually at the moment. So when we're observing, well, let me say, how is it that aging, what we associate with aging, the rigidity and avoidance that we associate with aging, why is that? Why have those things come to be associated with aging? It's because uh, in youth, even we start out as I don't know, but then we're moving toward I want to know. And that tends to, because we're pursuing I want to know and we're forming this identity, all part of the process of maturing, right? We're maturing by developing an ego. You don't have an ego, you're not going to know who to feed. So we go through the process of developing it so that it can take care of this. But then there's another step, which we generally overlook because it's not, nobody points it, very few people point it out to us. But this is the fruit of this ripening is then, uh, unlike youth who are just, you look at the kids, they're you call it ADHD, you call it whatever you want, but they're just bouncing all over the place. You can't keep their attention on something. But as we mature, then we can have that kind of curiosity and patience and persistence in our observation so that we can then start to rejuvenate. We rejuvenate, to rejuvenate requires that patience because the impulsive mind is screaming, get away, avoid, distract, do something, get comfortable. This hurts, not now, anything but this. So we have to be patient and we have to be curious, and we just quietly observe. And as we quietly observe and we notice all of those habits of avoidance, rigidity, unnecessary effort, tension, then there's this new blossoming. Then there's this new possibility. Then we are rejuvenated. And not only, so then we can live many lifetimes. Most people never live a single lifetime. They just suffer. But when you know the secret to rejuvenation, then you can live many lifetimes. You can actually live many lifetimes if you wish. And what I mean by that is that you're actually present to the experience and you are not bound by the past. So I'm sure many people have sometimes thought, I wish I could start over. I wish I could have been born into a different situation. I wish that I'd done that differently. I wish it wasn't too late. I wish. So these desires then in Buddhist philosophy then lead to rebirth. But it's just a rebirth into more suffering. And what I'm proposing is that as we rejuvenate, we actually live. We actually live, and we live. So what is it that defines a new lifetime? If you say, okay, you're going to be born again, what is that? Well, you're not bound by the past, right? I mean, the newborn baby doesn't have a past. The 75-year-old world famous nuclear physicist has this past. So supposedly, where is it? I don't know, but supposedly has a past and is bound by that past, or so he believes. And so he acts out of that. So he's not actually living, he's just reacting to the past. But when he becomes quiet and patient and observes his direct experience and sees these habits of avoidance and then just stays with the direct perception of the sensation. Okay, so do this right now. It's a long blah, 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 a lot of blabbing to get to this point. So do this right now. Observe the sensation right now. Notice the habits to do something with it, get away from it, understand it, grasp it, fix it, dismiss it, something, anything. And don't indulge those. Notice how all of those require effort. How do you know that that's true? I mean, like I say that often, but how could you know that that's true? Because I don't want you to just take my word for it. I want you to really be able to see that this is true. So if you were a corpse, and I came along and I tickled your little toe, it doesn't matter how intense the sensation of tickling is. You are not going to flinch. You're not going to laugh. You're not going to think about it. You're not going to hit me. You're not going to do anything because you're a corpse. So compare what you do to what a corpse would do. So what a corpse would do would be zero effort, right? Because can't make any effort. It's a corpse. So if you are doing something that a corpse would not do, you are making effort. You might say, well, that's crazy talk. If somebody tickles me, of course I have to react. You sure about that? I'm not saying you need to push it that far. That's kind of an extreme example, but are you sure about that? I'm proposing to you, not true. You can observe and find out that you are making unnecessary effort. And tickling is just a silly example, but this gets very real and has huge practical value when you start to see all of the reactivity throughout the day to all of the things that you try to avoid. And what are those things? They are sensations. That's all that's going on. So just notice these sensations. I mean, because you can tell stories about it. That's why I said we go out to the superficial level and we say, oh, what is this, that, and the other. A lot of stories. But what good have those stories done? I mean, really. We've got stories that tell us, I mean, some of the stories are nicer than others, for sure. I like the nicer stories better than I like the not nice stories, but let's just be honest about it. For all the talk of progress that a lot of people like to make, where is it? Where is the progress? Are you happy? Are you satisfied? I mean, I don't mean to downplay. There are many amazing things. It's wonderful that you're alive and that you're fed and you weren't killed off by whatever. But are you really living? Are you really satisfied? Are you really sincerely happy? And I would say most people are not. So let's just start to take a look and see why that might be. Instead of focusing on the stories, which just spin it, right? I mean, we all are kind of, we kind of know now that the politicians, the governments, they just spin it. Just spin. You'll never know the real truth to any of it because it's just spin. It's nauseating. And it doesn't satisfy. It's like you go to the restaurant and you're just trying to eat the menu. It's not satisfying. And the waiter comes over and says, these menus are going like hotcakes. They're so delicious. Isn't that amazing? And you're like, uh, hmm, yeah. They're spinning. It's just spin. You have to be truthful to yourself. If you're not satisfied, stop trying to eat the menu. Trying to eat the menu is just focusing on the stories. So let's get more intimate with our experience. And we can see what the dissatisfaction is. And I'm telling you, it is nothing more than, because the mind will spin the stories about how difficult and scary and confusing and hidden and impossible it all is, when in fact it's right here in plain view, so to speak. It is so intimate, so immediate, so always accessible, always, never not accessible. And it really is this simple. You notice the sensations right now. Notice the habits of avoiding, all the little ways in which you try to get comfortable, but you never succeed. And that's why I'm saying you've never succeeded. After all these years, you are the greatest expert on you and your life and your story and your path, your pursuit of happiness, your pursuit of comfort. And you have not succeeded. So if a friend of yours has gone to school and gotten their PhD, and then you say, uh, okay, so what are you gonna, what value does this offer you now? And they say, well, like, can you? Can you do something practical with it? Can you get a job with this? Can you help somebody with this? Is this useful in some way? And they said, well, I'm not really sure. I'm thinking I'm going to go back and do some more study to find out. And then they keep doing that for decades. At some point, aren't you going to maybe say to your friend, hey, do you consider maybe this just isn't working? So in our lives, we have this fantastic expertise on our stories, our lives, our identities, and it hasn't really worked out. So let's just be willing, let's just set that aside. Let's not use that as the standard. This is another important point, is you have to see how you use your habits as the standard by which you measure everything. So you say, oh, I'm unhappy, I'm dissatisfied, I'm going to do something different. And you maybe tune into this meeting and you say, oh, that sounds interesting, I'll do that. And you just observe quietly and you notice some discomfort. And then you say, oh, that's too uncomfortable. I don't like it. I don't like that at all. Feels bad, feels weird, does not feel settled at all. And then you're back into thought. And the next thing you know, the next time you kind of come to, you realize, oh, kind of back to normal again. Guess that's okay. Guess that's good. Better than that weird thing. Better than that weird experience. Better than that uncomfortable experience. So this is a way to get tripped up, is you observe, you're inquiring, you observe, you notice the discomfort, you notice the habits trying to avoid the discomfort. You maybe even start not indulging the habits of avoidance, so that you're just starting to sink into, immerse yourself more fully and more intimately into the direct experience. And then you just pop out because you say, whoa, that was weird. But here's the thing, you don't know what it is. You don't know what it is. You don't know that it's uncomfortable. You don't know that it's painful. You don't know that it's weird. You don't know that it's good or bad. What is your standard of measurement? Your habits. So again, you have to see that you organize everything in your life around what you don't want. And this is a recipe for misery. If you continue to do it, you just organize everything around what you don't want. And it's just as, it's like a big mess. You say, well, I really want to do something different. Okay, I'll try something different. Oh, that's weird. I don't like that at all. Oh, back to normal. So your center of gravity is actually in what you don't want. But because you keep avoiding it, you're just playing this game where you just sort of like you kind of like try to get escape velocity, and then you get sucked back into it, and your whole life is like that. And I'm saying that's why it requires this patience, persistence, and curiosity that is available with maturity. So you have to really be willing to keep looking very honestly. It's not gritting your teeth and trying to get through it, because that, you can do that for a long time and be miserable too. So that's a whole other trip. You say, oh, I'm becoming very spiritual. No, thank you. I don't want any of that kind of spirituality. That's just a overlay of that's a superficial implementation of what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is very gentle. It's very, very gentle. It's like you have, okay, so a newborn baby who's crying and you don't know how to comfort the baby. So, as a parent who has experience with this kind of thing, I can say that my experience of it has been stressful. I want to comfort the baby. I'm doing everything I know how, but nothing's working. So what am I going to do now? Hey, well, nothing's working. I'm getting so stressed out. I'm going to shake you. Oh, no, that's not a good idea. I'm getting so stressed out. I'm going to throw you. No, not a good idea. I'm getting so stressed. I'm going to yell at you. No. So we have to do it like we're holding a newborn baby. We have to be that gentle and that committed. Like, this is our baby. Let's be very committed. Let's we have to remember that, so because the temptation out of the habit that's conditioned in of violence, our habit is going to be to use violence. So you see how, when you really observe, you'll see that when you start to experience the discomfort, what you start to do is you start to use more effort. Doesn't mean anything bad about you. It's just how we have learned to do it. And you need, it pays to see this. So you see that you experience some discomfort, what your mind labels as discomfort. And you've got all these strategies that are just unconscious. You're just going about your day and you're fidgeting, trying to get comfortable, and this is going on all the time, and trying to, oh, God, I don't know what to do. I guess I'll go look at Facebook. Maybe I'll go for a walk. I don't know. So all these things, just trying to avoid. So then we become aware of these things, and then what do? I know this for a couple of reasons. One, because I've observed it in myself, and another because I get this feedback a lot from people who I'm coaching. And what I've learned in the coaching process is that, the process of self-inquiry is so simple that it's not about needing to give very complicated instruction. It's mostly about helping people to recognize the violence that they are in the habit of using, that they are blind to, and helping them to soften so that they don't use that violence so rapidly against themselves. Because the tendency is that when we become uncomfortable, we use some more unnecessary effort trying to manage it, control it, do something about it. And we become more agitated. So we tend to become more rigid, tense, irritable, tend to get more commentary in the head, more anxiety, frustration. And these are all ways in which we're expressing that violence. So we have to learn how to just become aware of that in subtler ways. And as we become aware of it, Well, all we're doing is we're just looking to see what is this actually, because the mind will have labels for it. The mind will tell us that it's this, that, or the other, but we are not. If we're serious about freedom, if we're serious about happiness, we can't afford to settle for those ideas, because what do they really mean? You can run your whole life from the boogeyman, but what is the boogeyman? I mean, do you think that there is actually a man called the boogeyman? There's not, right? There's not actually, like, you can't look up the boogeyman in the phone book, call up the boogeyman. Hey, boogeyman, you want to come get some pizza with me? Because he doesn't exist like that. But we can, but it is a stand-in for something. You see, the boogeyman is real, just not as a man. So the boogeyman, and I'm using this in a general sense, but these ideas, they're stand-ins for something real. They're stand-ins for an authentic experience that we have, but it's very blunt. It's not refined. So when you say boogeyman, what does that do? What is the boogeyman for you? What is that a stand-in for? It's a stand-in for fear, isn't it? So there's a real experience, and this abstract thing is a stand-in for that, but it's very blunt. It's vague. It's not clearly defined. So what we are doing is we are tracing that into subtler and subtler levels, more refined levels of experience, perception. So initially the reaction that we're attuned to is this level of story, the boogeyman. Oh, it's the boogeyman. It's the end of the world. Oh my God, I'm feeling bad. And if we live there, then we're just bouncing around, reactive all the time, bouncing around. But then when we start to take a look, okay, boogeyman. Okay, hold on a second now. I don't see no man. So there's not actually a boogeyman that's causing me a problem right now. So whatever I'm experiencing, which I am experiencing because I'm experiencing something, is not actually the boogeyman. The boogeyman is a stand-in for that. The boogeyman is this. It's a lazy and not a good way to cling to those kinds of stories, because they're not well defined, and it's too blunt of a tool to be very effective. We want finer, we want a greater refinement. And so we do that by tracing it through observation. We say, okay, well, wait a second. There's no man presently. I'm feeling something. I'm experiencing something. I was attributing it to this boogeyman. I'm using boogeyman as a generalization. You could fill that in with anything, any story, because hopefully it's clear that you cannot directly experience a story, right? So you say, "Oh, my wife is leaving me." Okay, your wife is leaving you, but are you experiencing your wife leaving you? Is that your experience? It's a story, but you can't directly experience that. Or I'm bankrupt. Okay, interesting. But can you directly experience that? So the direct experience is sensation. stories about it are not as direct. So we say the boogeyman, okay, there's no boogeyman. Or my wife is leaving me, but my wife isn't even here. I'm at work. My wife's not like my wife's not literally leaving me right now. I'm like, she's not here. I left her. I left her to come to work. So what is the experience now? It's not an experience of my wife leaving me. It's this experience. So I can look. What is this experience? Now, what happens when I look is it becomes more, my perception becomes more refined. I start to become more aware of what's actually happening. So whereas boogeyman is this big blob that occupies a massive amount of processing space, so it's very inefficient to be dealing with the boogeyman. When I become more refined in my perception, then that blob, all of a sudden, it's like when you open up, you peer into an atom and you see, oh well, what's in the atom? It's mostly space. It's the same here. Boogeyman, it seems like, was a big looming blob. Oh, boogeyman! And then you peer into this experience directly, and you realize, oh gosh, it's not really that. It's just like mostly space. Actually, I'm getting clearer now. What is actually going on? Well, it's not a boogeyman. It's this sensation. This sensation isn't nearly that big blob. It's this sensation. I can actually be with the sensation. I don't know how to deal with being with the boogeyman. That's just this big blob. But the sensation is more refined. It's more direct. I can actually start to perceive this. So then I start to notice all of my habits of trying to react to and avoid the sensation. And I start to notice that this sensation, in some sense, also has this quality of blobness to it. Because I'm not fully clear on what the sensation is. So I then continue to observe by not following the impulses to distract, avoid, get rid of, accommodate, adjust, find comfort, do something, anything. I'm just observing with curiosity. I really want to know, what is this? So I have to really tune into this sensation. And I have to become so sort of obsessed with it that everything else kind of just, like, I actually start to go into it. It's like 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 it is kind of like looking into a magnifying glass or into a microscope, because it's like sort of gets bigger and opens up, and my perception of it becomes more refined. So then I'm sinking into, or peering into, observing in a more refined way this sensation, and it also then it opens up, and I realize, wow, okay, this thing that had this kind of this blob-like quality, now all of a sudden I can start to perceive the finer qualities of it. Because my brain was just telling me, oh, it's a sensation, it's a bad one, I don't like it. It's like, at first it's saying it's a boogeyman, and I say, wait a second, I don't know, hold on, I don't know about boogeyman. Let me observe. I observe, okay, there's a sensation. But then my mind says, yeah, it's just a sensation. It's a bad one. I don't like that one. So wait a second. I'm going to observe. I observe. Sensation opens up, and I see, oh, okay. That sensation, which my brain was just saying, oh, it's bad. Get rid of it. Do something with it. Actually, I was doing that. I was doing that. I was doing that. I started to become aware of how I was doing it, how I was doing that sensation. So I've talked about this before, where it's like making a fist. After a while, you forget you're making a fist. You might think that's crazy, but I promise you, if you were to do this for long enough, you would forget that you were making a fist. You could look and see that you're making a fist, but you'd go through your life and this would seem normal if you did this long enough. Why? Because your nervous system adapts to whatever is normal, whatever is habitual. And that's just sort of its job. It just says, okay, well, 20 years been doing this. I guess that's just how things are. No sense in wasting any processing power on feeling a lot here, having a fine level of perception of this, because it's always like this, and it's kind of uncomfortable actually, because it requires a lot of chronic tension. So we'll just go numb. It's just what the nervous system will do. So when you start to peer in, when you actually start to peer into it, so I mean, to continue with this, I'm all over the place today, but to continue with this, okay, so if we've been doing this for 20 years, then nervous system is going to become numb, more or less, but there's still this feedback, and the nervous system is going to be processing it, and it doesn't even know what to do with it. So now it's going to say, well, it's the boogeyman. So you're walking around, and I feel so terrible. The boogeyman, it must be the boogeyman. Then somebody says, wait, did you ever consider maybe it's not the boogeyman? Why don't you just pause and really observe carefully and notice where you're experiencing this? What is this actual experience that you're calling boogeyman? And you just observing, and you notice, wow, yeah, actually I start to notice there's seems to be some kind of discomfort here in my hand. So then your body, your nervous system is going to say, forget about that. That's uncomfortable. Do something else. And it's going to give you all kinds of, it's going to argue for that limitation. It's going to say all the reasons why you shouldn't. You can't. You're just like this. That's just how things are. It's not really a big deal anyway. But if you continue to observe, then you'll notice that you're actually doing this. And this is where things become very, very interesting. Because when you realize that you're doing this, then you can start to observe how you do it. And again, it comes down to you're making effort. And this thing that you're doing is the thing that you've been telling the stories about. This is the thing you've been telling the stories about. So when you peer into it enough, you become aware of how you are doing the thing that you have been fighting against. The thing that became projected as the boogeyman is the thing that you've been doing. You might not yet be fully aware of how you do it, but you become aware that you are doing it. And at this point, you will never, you will become, well, your life will change, and it will change for the better if you continue to observe carefully. Because if you continue to observe carefully, you will become aware of how you do it. You'll become aware that that is unnecessary effort. And you will then slowly start to experience and explore how you can cease to do that unnecessary effort. But the tendency is, as I said, to still continue to use violence. Violence looks like this. Oh, I'm doing this. That's the problem. Here, I'll fix it. Problem solved. I did it. And then, oh, You say, well, no problem. I know how to fix that. I'm like, I'm fixing it. Fixed it. Oh. And you can do this for a long time. You can just do that for a long time. I'm telling you, you just keep observing. Don't try to fix it. Keep observing. And if you want to speed things up, the way to speed things up is to observe from as many different angles as you can. So how do you observe from as many different angles as you can? Well, move around. But move around. Okay. I had no idea I had anything to say today, and now I'm just blabbing. But you want to move around very slowly and very gently. And the reason for that is because fear, if you want a formula for fear, so you'll recall that I said that fear is when we organize our lives around fear, avoiding the thing avoiding the discomfort, that leads to this problem. So then it's worth recognizing how do you generate fear? And fear, like if you want to grow mold, for example, you probably want some moisture. Right? So you want the right environment to grow mold. So if you want to grow fear, what you want is the maximum gaps in awareness. Maximum gaps in awareness. Maximum avoidance of perception will give you the greatest yield of fear. It's important because the reason I'm saying this is because, again, our tendency is to move too quickly. And to think that if we just see something from one angle once, that's going to be all that we ever need to see. And what we're really wanting is not so much to see something. The answer is not going to lie in seeing a thing. The answer is in the discovery of the seeing. And what I mean by that is that when we really have the discovery of the seeing, then we know that we are able to see. That whatever can be seen, we can see. So we don't have all the anxiety of needing to see the thing. Now we're open to the seeing. And so in order to really cultivate that, we want to move slowly. We want to move slowly. And I mean physically move slowly, but also in all ways that we move. In all ways that we move. Just notice the tendency to think very fast. Slow that down. Not in a restrained way, but in like a calming way. Like you've got the stove turned up to high temperature and the thing's boiling, everything's flying out of the pot. Turn it down. Just a little simmer. So that we can starts to become smoother. The experience starts to become smoother. And then we can start to see more completely, so that there aren't these big gaps. Because if you imagine, like probably nobody's gonna know what I'm talking about, but if you had a 3D model on a computer, okay, you could and let's say you had a very old computer with not a lot of processing power, so we're talking about something back in the 1980s, and you got this three-dimensional model of a diamond. It doesn't matter, anything. And then you can change the camera angle. but you you don't have a lot of processing power, so it can't do it very smoothly. So it's just jumping. So it sort of approximates. You kind of get an idea. You kind of like, yeah, okay, that's interesting. I kind of get a sense of it. But it's more jarring versus if it's a smooth, continuous rotation, smooth, continuous movement. It's much more pleasing. It's much more pleasing for it to be a smooth, continuous movement because it fills in the gaps. And then we have less fear. Now, not that it creates a great deal of fear and anxiety to see something doing that on a computer screen, but in our, I mean, maybe to some extent, actually, that's true. Generates some stress in the nervous system, but more to the point is that in our lives, we can start to see how it is that we settle for incomplete models of things. And instead, we don't need to have a model, and certainly not an incomplete model. We can actually just remain with the direct experience so that all the gaps get filled in. We just become constantly curious. And as the gaps get filled in, then where is fear? Where can the fear be? It's like, where does the dark go when the light is on? So the fear, like the dark, doesn't have an independent existence. It only exists in the seeming absence of the light. I mean, I hope that makes sense. The darkness is not a thing. I'm not saying that there's no reality to it, but it's not a thing. If there was no light, there would be no darkness. Darkness only exists in the absence of, well, it only exists when there's the apparent absence of light. It's relative. So too is fear. When there's sufficient awareness, there can't be fear. Just as there can't be darkness when there's sufficient light. When there's sufficient awareness, there can't be fear. What could there? Fear is the absence of sufficient awareness. Long spiel, but I think I'm done. So I'll open it up to you. Usual. Oh, I did actually. There was one question. That came in over the chat. There were several, but I think I addressed them. Oh, well, there are two. Okay, so one was said, what is a body mind? Body mind is a phenomenon that we, call this thing. It's one thing, body mind. And then there was a question, any pointers on how to approach bad sleeping habits? As it feels like my head screams intention. Yeah. So, I mean, when you say bad sleeping habits, I would say, if you're saying that the challenge in sleeping is that you perceive that you've got too many thoughts, so your head is screaming. I don't know that if it's literally screaming, or if you mean that it's just the thoughts are very loud. The thoughts are a product of tension. I won't go into great detail on that, but you can, anybody who wants can prove that to themselves. If you release all tension, you can't have a thought, or at the very least, you can't focus on a thought. I guess I shouldn't say you can't have a thought, but you can't be focused on a thought. The focus on a thought, and in particular, by the way, it's eye and facial tension that really is specific to thought. But what I would say about that is that there are a lot of things that can affect sleep. I mean, you want to make sure. So I can't tell you all the things, but I can give you a few pointers. I mean, one is make sure that you're eating well. If you're not eating well, that can significantly impact your sleep in a negative way. And by eating well, I just mean eating well for you, eating to meet your nutritional needs well. So I can't know what that means for you because I don't know how you are or are not eating or what your present needs are, but you want to make sure that you're taking care of that. So you just listen, tune into what are your needs? Are you taking care of those needs? And then I would say that give yourself some time to, well, a couple things. I mean, one is give yourself some time to wind down at night. If you're high strung, then you probably don't want to be looking at Facebook late at night. You probably don't want to be using the internet at all late at night. You probably want less stimulation and really tune into. Oh, so I wake up too late. Well, I'll continue that for anybody else who is interested. But you want to notice, kind of similar to what I was talking about earlier. I mean, through this whole long spiel, is you want to notice the direct experience, because you'll notice that what if your body is tired, which it may well be, and you're having trouble sleeping, then it's because your body is tense that you're having trouble sleeping. So you can observe your experience and you can become aware of that tension and you can learn how to soften that tension. It's a process. Don't expect, that's why I say you have to be patient with it. Don't expect that it's going to happen in an instant. But if you are patient and persistent with it, it works like nothing else. But it says, to clarify, I wake up too late. Maybe there are a lot of thoughts, but it seems like it's just a sensation of screaming tension. Yeah, well, I'm not sure how that how that prevents you from waking up earlier. But I think the same thing applies, which is that you have to get clear for yourself in your direct experience what exactly the experience is. Because if you settle for the thought about it, it's too amorphous, doesn't have enough precision for you to actually be able to do anything meaningful with it. You have to observe in a very curious way so that you start to peer into it with greater refinement, and then you get greater clarity on what's actually happening. And what you will find, procrastination, well, yes, but procrastination is procrastination is still a story about it. Do you see? I hope you can see that, because procrastination is like saying the boogeyman. So why do I wake up too late? Well, the boogeyman. Boogeyman keeps me in bed too late. It's the same story fundamentally as procrastination, because what does that mean? We don't know. So you have to look for yourself in your own direct experience to see what is the actual experience. It's not procrastination. You cannot experience procrastination. Procrastination is a description of something. Procrastination is an idea. But the actual experience, so if I had 100 people who said, if I was to do a study on procrastination and I put out a call for procrastinators and I got 100 people to participate in my study, I could have 100 different people who say they're experiencing procrastination, but all of them are experiencing something completely different. If I said, I want to do a study on people who wake up at 10 a.m. And who have a sensation of a pin pricking their left eyeball, that would be much more specific. That would be that would be a better sample in terms of specificity. Whereas procrastination could be, who knows, gazillion different things. So anybody else? Anybody have any questions? The usual caveat is that sorry, there was another message coming through. This is being recorded. It will be up on YouTube publicly. So if you speak, you will be in the recording on YouTube publicly. If you don't want to be in the public recording, then don't speak. And as to the other comment, yeah, that's great. So you notice what you notice. You just start to notice those sensations, and then just continue to be curious about those. Because you're doing well. I mean, you're following the inquiry very well. You start out with a very gross level story, and then gets to a slightly subtler story, and then slightly subtler. So you just keep following that. You just keep observing. You just keep seeing with greater specificity what exactly the experience is. There's no end to it, by the way. And that might seem like bad news, but it's not bad news. It's good news. It seems like bad news only because the perception is that you're suffering. So long as you're suffering, then you say, oh, if it doesn't end, then it's just going to be suffering forever. But there's a point at which the curiosity takes over to a point where you can't believe the story so much anymore. Maybe it still has a little bit, it's like, I still have a little bit of that, way more than I would like. But even at another level, there's not so much believing of the story, because there's a certain threshold that gets crossed where it's not really suffering anymore. You might say, not my favorite. Like sometimes I'm like, here this goes again. I wish I had like better refined perception so that I wasn't doing this again. But it's not really suffering. So you're doing great. I mean, just continue with that. Just continue to see subtler and subtler. And this is to the person who's been asking the questions, that because we have somewhat of a relationship over the months, and so I've seen your I've seen your progress with this kind of inquiry, and it's getting a lot clearer in you. So I think you're doing well.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Just wanted to say, finding it very useful to sensations, and also experiencing that the story how the story can be let go of, and how one can become curious about the sensation.
Mhm.
Now, what I find is this inquiry and curiosity is when the sensations are positive, like when I'm having a pizza,
Mhm.
that can always, because it's pleasant, I interpret it as pleasant.
Mhm.
It can be, I can sense a curiosity. I can have a curiosity about that because this is a new pizza I'm having. So I'm not so much imposing memory on the present experience.
Mhm.
But when it comes to negative, unpleasant sensations,
Mhm.
I tend to assume that I know what this is.
Right.
I've had this before. This is going to be just a repetition, and so that hampers me. I don't want to go into it more deeply because
Mhm.
I predict it's just going to turn out the same,
Yeah.
which was bad in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that seems like that's fairly well to be expected. The thing about it though is you know, you can just tell the truth about it, which is that uh, what you've always done is what results in more of the same. So
Yes.
so approaching it with curiosity, genuine curiosity and openness would be different, and therefore more
Yes.
likely to produce a different outcome versus doing the same thing you've always done.
I was kind of just asking myself, what would be a way around this this assumption that
Yeah.
the uncomfortable experience will just be the same.
Mhm.
So I'm playing with how to get around that one.
Well, yeah, but what I'm saying is, um, don't try to get around it. Because I mean, not to be the word police or anything, but your words reveal what it is that you're hoping to do, right? You're hoping to
Yeah.
get around it, which is fine. We always hope, but um, you can just see, well, that's what I've always done. I've always tried to get around it. That's what doesn't give me very satisfying results, is trying to get around it or past it or avoid it. So um, so if you want something truly different, then you just have to see that that's what's happening. You just see that, oh yeah, I'm trying to avoid it. I'm trying to get around it. And so you just watch how you try to get around it. You start to notice, because here it is. It's front and center, absolutely present. Couldn't notice it if it wasn't here. So it's here. And if you don't do anything, it's not, then you're not getting around it. You don't do anything, you're not going to avoid it. You don't do anything, you're just going to be observing.
Yeah, and I think that's what I'm saying. What is for me hampering the observing is the assumption that there will be nothing fresh to be discovered here.
Well, yeah, of
So
course.
why go there?
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying, is that in and of itself is unnecessary effort. So anytime there's a certain these things have a certain smell to them, and you just become like a bloodhound. You just start to pick up the scent, and you recognize the scent. So anytime the scent is there, you're like, oh yeah, there it is, that unnecessary effort. So you're just familiarizing yourself with another subtlety of unnecessary effort. That's all. That's good. So you're seeing, okay, here's where I seem to be getting hung up, and then you can just see. So I'm just pointing it out to you, and then you can just look and see that, oh yeah, that idea that this is hampering me is really just pointing to, it has that smell of unnecessary effort. So why don't I now just look to see how I'm making unnecessary effort?
Bingo. Bingo. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, got it.
Good. And it's always the same. And by the same, what I mean is you'll just to save time, so you're not looking for any kind of thing. I mean, you just look and see in your direct experience, felt experience, you'll notice there's some gripping, some unnecessary effort of some kind that you can feel. And that's it. You don't need to go looking for something else. It doesn't need to have some grand, glorious insight that or revelation. You don't need, it's that simple, and you just see it, and it takes you to, it refines you.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that I tend to believe that my contribution to the process must be a little more energetic, it seems, than is necessary.
Yeah, of course. I know. We're very eager to participate.
Yeah.
I mean too. I'm I'm like I'm always eager to participate. I want something to do.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Anybody else? I blabbed extra long today, so
Joey, can I ask?
sure.
I got two questions.
Mhm.
So the first one is um, about attachments.
Mhm.
So there's this story. It's not a story. We can see that in children. I see that playing out in my life quite a bit, and I don't know what to do about it. So if you give a child a toy and you take that away from him,
Mhm.
he cries for a couple of days
Mhm.
because he thinks that's part of him. So that's what I feel in my life right now, like with
Mhm.
people, with
Mhm.
with situations. So I feel like when I lose it, I feel this overwhelming situation,
Mhm.
and I know I can make peace with that feeling, but I still feel like I have this desire to have them around, have
Mhm.
these around, and I mean, it's not too overwhelming, but these things keep playing out in my head. Like
Mhm.
I really, really desire want this.
Mhm.
It's not so much of a suffering, but I have that impulse of desire to
Mhm.
have that attachment going on.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, so you can, it's great. You can apply the same process to that. So uh so with anything, so we use words to talk about things. So we're always telling stories, and the stories are uh pointing us to something. So it's fine to use a word like desire. It's great. It's no problem. But you can see how you, within your own process, have been stopping short by just settling for the idea of desire. And what you can do is, don't stop short like that. You just inquire by looking to see in your actual experience, what is it? What is the experience? So don't just settle for desire, Because if you say desire, you say, oh yeah, it's desire. So now I'll think around it because I know what desire is. So I say, but then you're looking all around it because you think there's a problem and you're trying to solve the problem by looking all around and you haven't looked in. So look in desire. What is desire? You have to look for yourself to see, and it won't be, there's not one singular experience. There's the present experience that you were calling desire. So you have to look to the present experience that you're calling desire more intimately in your direct experience to find out what is this experience. Because it's like I was saying with the boogeyman. So it's this sort of blob. Desire is a blob. You say, oh, I'm experiencing this desire. And I say, oh yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. I've experienced desire too. What does that mean? What are we talking about? So I don't know if I know what your experience of desire is. So you can look and get clearer for yourself on what is this experience that you are calling desire. So just remove the word desire. And now look to see what is the actual experience. So if you said, hey, I'm experiencing this hot burning like sensation in the pit of my stomach that pulsates 3 times per second. I'd say, okay, that's more specific. It's a lot more specific than saying desire because like I was saying with procrastination, if I have a study, same with desire. I say, okay, I'm going to do a study on desire. I'm going to get 100 participants who experience desire. Well, what are they experiencing? I have no idea. Could be 100 different experiences.
So stories doesn't matter.
Right. So what we want to do is we want to look. I mean, when we're, so the functioning of the organism is such that the stories are not bad. The stories are great. The generalizations are great. Boogeyman is great. It serves its purpose. It's only a problem when it's a problem. It's a problem when the lack of refinement of awareness cultivates fear, and then we organize our lives around fear, and that spirals into suffering. So then what that's showing us is, okay, these stories aren't working very well. Now at that point, sometimes people say, okay, well, we'll just change the stories. Well, how do you know how to do that? You can't know how to do that, and you could spend your whole life trying to change the stories and not have success with that. Instead, let's refine our awareness so that we can remove the fear, because the fear doesn't have an independent existence. It can't exist when there's sufficient awareness. So we remove the fear by refining our awareness so that we're not out here at this level of the story. We're more at the level of direct perception. And then from there, a new, more successful story can spring forth. The story is it's a shorthand. It's a like a functional program that we can install. But in order for that to come from for it to actually be useful to us, it has to arrive from this refined level of awareness, from subtlety. So you just take a look when you're, and this is true of anything, when you feel like, oh, I'm stuck and I don't know what to do. Well, just notice what you're telling yourself and where you're just accepting some stories without inquiring into them. So if you say, well, I'm experiencing this desire and this desire seems to be a problem because I have all this longing, I had these things and then they were taken away and now I'm experiencing this longing and it's so hard, it's so uncomfortable, it's so miserable, I don't know what to do. Then, okay, well, look to see what the actual experience is. Don't just accept that it's desire or that it's desire caused by something that you don't have now, because those are all stories that you can't do anything about. but you can look to see, well, what is this experience actually? What is, and you'll see, just like I was saying, it starts out, desire is this sort of amorphous blob that occupies a lot of processing space. And as you peer into it and you have this greater refinement, then it starts to, all this, the space inside of that is clarified, and you just see, okay, well, we can really just dial it into this, which is more, has more specificity. And then you peer into that, and that just sort of does the same thing. So then you realize, oh, it's now it's just this, and you can really get clear on it.
Yeah, I see that. I think it's the same with everything.
Yeah.
It's just the direct experience of it. And
Yes.
in that direct experience, I don't know, this is my experience. That's wholeness, right? We see that I'm not complete with this, but I'm not complete if I'm not with this person. But if I'm just with the direct experience, I recognize that if I just accept this direct experience as it is, I don't need that person or that thing.
Right.
Yeah. Or whatever. Do you agree, or?
Well, of course. I mean, if you needed it, yes, of course. That's how the stories always go. The stories always say, I need something. And reality demonstrates that you don't need it. If you needed it, you would need it, right? I mean, you would be dying without it.
Okay.
So reality is revealing that that's not true. If you're believing the story, then you just get stuck in this loop of, oh, I need it, and you're acting as if you need it. I'm dying because I need it. But then you actually take a look and you realize, oh, okay, I don't need it. Now I can get clear on what the actual experience is. Because if you're just caught in this loop of I need it, then it's like survival. This whole survival thing is triggered, and so you become in this sort of panic, like I need it. It's desperate. It's urgent. I have to have it now. I'm going to die. And when you actually observe and you peer into that and you start to see what's actually happening, then that kind of just starts to get unpacked, and you get clarity, and you realize, okay, I there's a little bit more space here than I thought. There's not so much urgency. I don't need to be so reactive. I can just observe. I can really just get clear on what the actual experience is, rather than just being reactive and in this loop. I can just get clarity.
The other question I have is about coronavirus. We're all self-isolating. I still have this longing to go out, and we're all told like we shouldn't be doing that. And we're all told anything happens, we're told like this is how it should be, and if you cross this line, you'll get infected and you'll be dying. And there's lots of boundaries.
Who is telling that?
I mean, college, government, everyone is just like, there's no college for me now. Everything is just online, and I gotta sit in my room all day. So, I mean, of course, we have these fears. I prepared myself to die. That's what I told him. It's like I'm ready to die now. Like I'm pretty sure it's gonna get worse. I'm pretty sure we're all. I don't know. From what I've been told, it's gonna get pretty worse. I don't know if I'm gonna survive, but I tell everyone I'm gonna die. I told my mom, she freaked out. I'm ready to die.
Yeah, not a nice thing to tell your mom, but you're in your 20s, so you can't help it.
Yeah, but she was okay with it.
Yeah,
I told her
I did that kind of thing too when I was in my 20s.
Oh, cool. We are pretty similar. What do you say about this situation? What can you say about the coronavirus and the limitations of and in general the perception? People are just freaking out.
Well, and that you just said it. What else could I say about it? I mean, you've just said it. People are freaking out. I mean, you know, between one day and the next, people freaked out. And
This,
what is actually happening?
there's this fear.
There's a lot of fear.
If you go to grocery store, everything is just stocked out. There's nothing there.
So you can see what happens. This is what happens. This is what's happening for each of us when we, you know, Facebook is like the conditioned mind, right? So you can tune into that and you can live there and take that to be your reality. And then you see that because it's so superficial, there are huge gaps in awareness, because all you get is like these headlines. And the headlines are designed, I mean, a good headline there are rules for a good headline. There are rules. If you want to work for a media organization, and you want to write headlines, you have to write by the rules. They're not going to let you just write whatever you want, because they're in the business of selling that information. They're in the business of getting your attention. So the headlines are designed to get your attention. They follow rules that are designed to get your attention, and not only get your attention, but keep your attention and cause you to want to find out more. But the more that you're going to find out is not actually in the direction of subtlety, it's just in the direction of more spin.
Yeah.
So when you can just see what happens is you're going about your life and the mind throws up its headline because it's been trained. Again, it's not the enemy. It's not a bad dog. It's just what it does. It's what we've trained it to do. Throws up the headline designed to get your attention. And then you can see what happens if you continue, if you follow along with that, you're going to get more of the same. But I've said this before, that way, that mode of being is governed by entropy, which means that over time it falls into chaos. It's a sort of like default survival program. But it's not meant for long term, because if it's long term, it's governed by entropy. Everything falls into chaos. So you see what happens. All the people who are believing what they read on Facebook have gone out and bought all the food. And in the US, you can bet they bought all the guns too. Scary thought. And so now there's a real consequence. So we are seeing what it is that what happens within us happening on a larger scale. So if you're not happy with that, then if you're not pleased with the outcome of that, then just pay attention to it and see, oh, this is very helpful lesson. It's illustrating to me exactly what I do. So now I can observe that in myself. And I can see, as I've said before, that fear, if we want to breed fear, we want to generate maximum gaps in awareness. The least refined awareness possible. Just stay focused here on the headlines. That's the way to breed fear. And so if we're dissatisfied with that, then the remedy is refined awareness. So that we're looking to see what is actually happening. Because the story is whatever the story is. But what's actually happening? You see, you're in your room. A month ago, you were in your room. I saw you. What's different now? Just a story.
The same rooms feel scary.
Of course. And outside is zombie attacks. Right?
Nowhere to go.
Whereas a month ago, the story was different. A month ago, it was whatever it was. You know, it was whatever. It was that story. But now it's a different story. But what is actually different? If you really take a look, what is actually different? And the truth will be not much. And that cuts both ways. That's positive because you can see that all the things that you are so fearful of aren't actually real. And in the other way that you can understand that is that it means that not a lot has changed. So you're still producing the same kinds of things because of the tendency to stay here on this level. So that's helpful, right? I mean, and that's not because there's something wrong with you and shame on you and you're failing. I mean, that's just like, that's helpful to see. At any level, there's always more refinement. So as long as we're willing to always, like beginner's mind, we always are willing just to learn, to not know, not to be humbled, not to cling to our supposed credentials and just say, okay, yeah, I don't know. So we can start to see that, oh, well, if there's some similarities because not a lot has really fundamentally changed, then what I'm starting to come to recognize more is the ways in which I'm still doing the same things. So I'm becoming more aware of my habits of making unnecessary effort. And as I see those things, I can become curious about them. I can discover them at a more refined level. And then what I start to discover is softness, spaciousness, and a release of those habits so that then truly something new can come. The amazing thing is, you look at how it is that people have been mobilized by fear, by a fearful story. And just think of the possibilities. Think of the possibilities. What if people were mobilized by something positive? What if people were mobilized by a positive vision? What if people were mobilized by a vision of goodness and generosity and brotherly love, connection. And to me, that's amazing, because we have huge potential. We could do amazing things. Which we often see demonstrated to us in a negative way. But the energy is neutral. We can mobilize it in any which way. So you can buy into the story, and then you can react to it, and what are you going to do?
Scared to death.
Yeah. Or you can just choose to investigate. Don't believe the story, because I mean, the story is never true. No matter what the story is, no matter how truthful the story is, it's never true. And so while stories can be useful in times of emergency, maybe, we have this ability to really question whether or not we really are benefiting from the story. And you can just tell the truth, which is when you're in your room and you're freaking out, that's not helpful. So then you get to choose whether you are investing and energizing that story, which, by the way, as I pointed out, has real consequences. Because because how do these things happen? How is it that all the food got bought? It didn't just happen, people did it. People had to do that. So there is I'm certain of it, that there is a possibility, because we see it. I mean, we see that there's a shift in consciousness, and I'm not saying that in some woo sense. I mean, we see that there's a point at which there's not mass mobilization around the story, and then we see there's a tipping point, and then there's mass mobilization, mass buy-in, and the people go and buy everything from the stores. So if we see that happening in that way, we know it could happen in another way. We could have a shift in consciousness in which there's a mass buy-in to self-inquiry. Why not? And while you're sitting in your room and you see so clearly that what are you going to do? You know, is there any positive action you can take? If so, take that action. Otherwise, just observe all the parasitic actions that you're doing unconsciously, and then start to just become more aware of them, and you can start to choose, do I really want to do that?
What if I want to go out? I have this tendencies to go out.
I don't know. I can't tell you what to do. I mean, I'm just saying that you're going to do whatever you're going to do, and you just observe. I don't know. I don't know what the state of things is in anywhere.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, it could be that if you go out, you'll get shot. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a possibility.
Yeah, maybe the police up there in Canada have orders to shoot anybody who comes out of their dorm.
Yeah, that's what I told my mom. I could be killed in an earthquake, an accident. Why are you worried about a virus? That's I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's exactly the kind of thing you tell your mom when you're in your 20s. And exactly
I
the kind of
don't-
thing you would never tell your mom when you're in your when you're older than that.
Oh,
But that's
okay.
okay.
Yeah, I'm just fearless. I'm ready to go.
Well, is yeah, I mean, and your poor mom, you know. All right, it's late. I'm gonna go.
All right.
Thank you, everybody. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.